Thank you, Fox. It's really good being here. And well, let's go straight right away to the business. Adaptive reuse, and basically I will start right where Konrad ended. Konrad showed already the slide of relating to competencies, and wait a minute now, when I just fix. All right. Nowadays we are speaking about adaptive reuse, and well, we've been doing conservation, restorations, and renovations and alterations for buildings, and as already mentioned, mostly I've been dealing with buildings of 20th century and from the buildings from 1930s and onwards. I can't see too much difference making adaptive reuse or then making sort of restorations, what we have done during the last 30 years. We do have the same kind of work we have to do for buildings when we plan new uses for those, even though we have the same tasks like preliminary works and thorough surveys and design phases and adaptation phases. Now, mostly I'm now concentrating in a couple of these, like listening the buildings. Less is more, time and team. Konrad already mentioned that reading the building is enormously important. I call it listening the building, because whatever we do for the building, whether we make the building kind of a library again to be a library, so with the old use, or when we kind of change the use completely, we have to understand what the building is about. We have to understand the building, what it can tolerate, and so that we have the shoe of 44, and we just can't fit the foot of 50 to this shoe of 44. That's impossible, and we have to understand and we have to realize. Then we just go to think some other means for buildings, for the old buildings. We have to do similar kind of roadmaps for buildings. We have to invalue about the functions, the new functions. We have to value the techniques we are bringing into the buildings, whether the use is the old one or whether it's completely new. Then I'm used to work with this famous principle of less is more, because when we are dealing with old buildings, we may have humble buildings, and they may not have even too many kind of historic materials or constructions or building parts, which are really important. But when we understand that those are there and existing, we have somehow to honor them, and we have to respect those, whatever we then adapt just around those. Oh, sorry. Thought that was close, but it just sometimes happens the way it is. Sorry for that. Well, when we restore the old buildings, basically with the old ones, when we do use old materials, old systems and others, it may be so that we kind of, when we adapt new ones, naturally we use new technologies, etc. But those have to be in balance every time we do that. Then if we think of time, the time is, if we think that we have kind of the project of 100 units, and that time is essential for us when we do design, that time is essential for us when we make the building construction works on there. But at least in Finland, it happens to be so that when we have those 100 units, normally kind of decision making should take something like 10 or 15 units or whatever, but it just happens to be so that half of the time will go to different kind of politics, different kind of decision makings, etc. And then actually for the real work, for designers, for designing things, we have less time and even less for real construction works. And there is the quality we are actually looking for in this design phase and then at the construction phase as well. And that is why we should really kind of look for time and speak for it, that we should have enough time whatever we do, because when we are dealing with old buildings, really time is something which is important. Otherwise, we may do bad decisions, and that's worst of all. Team is something which is kind of really something else. We are not here alone. We have teams. We have kind of politicians. They have teams, and when we do decisions, then when we make design phases, we have not only architects, we have engineers, and we have other designers, and we have our clients and others, and we have to create a team which really works. And when we are on building sites, that is even more important, because without good spirit on site, we can't have good results at all. And that is something which I try to kind of teach when I give lectures for the students, that there are a couple of things, and one thing is to work on building site, and you have to kind of try to understand how workers and how professionals are working. You have to be in there. You have to give even samples how to work, and you have to make sometimes painting models or whatever, and that is, you have to be involved in every single phases, and that's how we can get the quality. We'll go to look for a couple of stories about different adaptive reuse cases, and then about a couple of restorations. Here is Sunila pulp mill by Alvarado from 1936 to 1938. Then we have huge extensions from late 1940s, and on the left-hand side you can see the ready building from late 1930s, and then on the right-hand side a situation today. So the old factory actually is just covered with all kinds of parts from 1950s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. Here's a story that the building and the whole complex was about to be closed in 2010, and all kind of historic National Board of Antiquities people and others were horrified at what will happen to this monument, which is very much listed, and what will be the new use for that. But suddenly the company which owns the building, then after a couple of months of silent time at the factory, decided to go on with making and producing pulp, which is good for the moment. But just in the future, it will be a really interesting question what to do with a building which is listed, and that's rather remote and far from Helsinki, our capital, and it would be really hard to kind of think of any Tate Modern to this sort of place, even though facilities should be there, but that will be the question then in the future. But these kind of industrial buildings and settings we do have a lot in Finland. And I guess that's not just our problem. Then we have Paimio Sanatorium by Alvar Aalto from 1929 to 1923. And first that was a tuberculosis sanatorium, and then actually reused already in late 1960s as a hospital. And as we understand, the hospital use is totally different than sanatorium use. So already in 1960s, they altered the building from inside. They changed all the doors to wider ones so that you can roll beds inside the rooms, etc. So only one museum room was left there. So that's because, and that's the dilemma when we have basically the original use at the building. Well, nowadays the situation is such that the university hospital, which has been using this sanatorium building, has left it, and now new uses are going to be found for the place. There is some sort of competition going on at the moment, and there has been a couple of rehab centers for youth, children, and then for elderly people, and that would be really good use for it. But it's once again politics, so we can't yet know what will happen to this masterpiece of early 1930s. Here you can see on the right-hand photo already alterations on this patient wing when it was covered and made for offices in early 1960s because of this sanitarium need gone. So we could say that not always the original uses are the best ones for buildings. It might be a lot better for those if we find more gentle uses for the future. Then just a couple of photos of one old sawmill building from Otaniemi campus. That's technically university just outside of west of Helsinki city center, and by Alvar Aalto once again from 1954. And in fact, that was the first building at the whole campus because that was totally forests, and they needed a building. They needed a sawmill just to cut all the wood there and make it to boards and make it happen. And then later on, when it first was used as a sawmill, then it was used for teaching for 30 and more years. Educational use ended in 1990s, and then it has been working as a workshop for the university. And then the alteration we made in 2007, and that's now used for University Information Center. And that was just when the reuse project started. Still worked as a saw. But as we know that these works are not always easy. Normally we just see kind of the situation before and then we see the results, but nothing from between, and it can be so hard as here when we have been speaking about simple buildings and basically simple buildings without any techniques, house techniques, ventilation, or well, electricity they had, but basically no ventilation at all. So everything had to be created. And how to create something where you have really simple and small premises to work with. And technologies were just driven through the floor, just to the walls, and that was hidden over there, so that we could have all of those ceiling supporting structures visible, because they were really the most of the building from inside. And there are a couple of photos from the recent situation when it was finished, and now using for lectures at the university, and lots of techniques inside, but also the original saw from 1940s inside. On countryside we have lots of troubles. Well, this is a farming area here, and we have in southern Finland lots of estates with, well, big barns without any uses at all. And here's one kind of a good solution for one barn, a brick barn from 1910s, and kind of reuse as a brewery, a small brewery which has been growing since that, so we may not consider that anymore as a small one. Funny thing was that we had those openings from the attic, and earlier we had some 40 or 50 cows just living here, and all the hays, they were just dropped from the attic to the cows to eat. And nowadays malt and other things are then dropped to those tanks which are producing different kind of brews at the moment. Here we can see also the fact that very often we are speaking about limited funding, and we just have to be so innovative as possible in every sense. For instance, here all those tempered windows have been found from one kind of window maker. They were wrong size windows, and they were kind of then bought really inexpensively to the place and then used. So reuse in that sense as well. And then a peculiar story from Estonia, from Tartu, Estonia, about building which Alvar-Aalto designed in 1930s, just after Paimio Sanatorium. And it was, well, the family escaped to Finland because of occupation by Soviets in 1940, and since 1940s it has been transformed. It was transformed for quarters for 7 families, and then in early 2000s, then the original family got it back and then sold it to Turku University, and now that's a base camp for the Turku University scholars in Tartu, and that's how it looks like today. And what about wars or disasters in general? Here we have Viipuri Library from, well, first bottom right from 1942, from the wartime, and then the upper one and the left-hand photos, those are from late 1940s, early 1950s. So we can see that the library, yes, it exists, but it's totally forgotten and abandoned. It was abandoned for more than 10 years, and basically everything was away and taken off, and all the wood parts burned, etc. And then Soviets restored or renovated that in late 50s and early 60s. Here we can see a couple of those photos from that period, and then again neglected for 30 years before we started the restoration in 1994. That took more than around 20 years altogether, but here we have the result. So even we do have the original use there, we could consider this a reuse thing as well. Here we have the original situation on the left-hand side, and on the right hand from 1960s with granite facades, and then actually we have the present situation with soapstone facades from the same quarry which made it originally. Then I will just end here telling that, you know, whatever we teach for our students, we have to teach them that we are all together there. This is a teamwork. Here we have my colleague from Viipuri Library design time, and then our constructor who made all the roofs, flat roofs at the library some 10, 15 years ago. You just have to have shashlik once in a while. It makes things better and we get more quality. Thank you.